Hey all, welcome back. We're here again. We're going to be, my name's Amanda, and we're doing Convos with the candidates. And we're excited to now have with us Jermaine Reed, who's joining us this evening. Welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Thanks.
This real nice.
Yeah, it's a little different, right? It's probably a
Yeah.
nice break from the other forums that you've been participating in.
Cool.
So it's
Love
good to
talking
have
to
you. Yeah, so I just want to remind everyone out there that we will have questions from me, and then it'll open up to questions from the audience in Facebook Live. And if you are a Kansas City voter, go ahead and hit that love button. And if you have a question, post it in comments. All right, so before we begin, I just want to thank again, shout out to Jennifer, who's the owner of Plush Life Salon, for hosting today's conversation. All right, Jermaine, you ready?
Let's rock and roll.
All right, let's
this
just dig into it.
Fun, interactive. Nice.
All right, so I have a two-part question for you. First, I just want you to kind of start off by introducing yourself and tell us why you're running for mayor. And then also what you expect to accomplish on behalf of Black women voters.
Well, first of all, again, thanks for having me here to join you all in this discussion. I think it's really important that so many different platforms are often used so that you can convey your message to citizens of this city. Again, my name is Jermaine Reed. I have had the honor of serving on the City Council for the past 8 years. I often like to say almost nearly a decade now on the City Council, and representing the heart of, I believe, this city in the 3rd District. And over the past 8 years, I've worked extremely hard trying to bring opposing sides together to really move our city forward. There have been a number of issues that I've certainly challenged over the course of my tenure on the City Council, from increasing the minimum wage and leading the fight to do that from $15 an hour to eliminating the food desert right in the heart of this city, with 2 grocery stores that I have championed, one at 39th and Prospect, another at 31st and Prospect. Of course, the 39th and Prospect is Aldi's, the other one is Sunfresh Grocery Store, which opened up last year. And then a host of other things that I'm sure throughout the course of our discussion we'll have an opportunity to discuss. But the latter part of your question in terms of women voters is that, women are key to our election, and just as any other election, and we've seen that in multiple elections that have certainly just passed, and they often are the ones who are shaping kind of how elections are going, and those issues that are important to them just as much as they're important to me. One being quality of life, and how you all can raise your families in a safe environment, one that's free of crime and violence. Additionally, the importance of making sure that your kids have a safe place to play, a place that you are able to worship, a community that doesn't have crumbling infrastructure like sidewalks, curbs, and potholes that we see when you're just driving. Right? It's just real life.
It's a little serious. Right now, I was just gonna say.
And so there's a number of things, and so I look forward to that discussion. And we've had a lot of women who have been extremely supportive throughout the course of this campaign for me for mayor, just as they have throughout my course on the City Council as well. And I'm always reminded of my strong mother, who raised my brothers and I in this community. A single mother, 5 boys. I'm the best looking one of those guys, that's for sure. Best looking one.
All right.
They may be watching, so I'm gonna cut it. But sometimes we were house to house. At one point, we were even homeless. But my mother instilled a great sense of education. She instilled a sense of value and a sense of trying to make a difference in the world around you. And her example of a strong woman, just as well as my grandmother and other women in my life, I think really play a key role in how it has shaped my world vision and view about trying to make a difference in this city and this community.
All right, great. And then before we actually go into the next question, we have our first submitted question from Facebook Live.
Nice.
So,
hello, Facebook.
Yeah, so it's one of our sisters. It's Sis Bennett has a question about how are you going to deal with the possible shipment of spent nuclear fuel and high-level radioactive waste coming through KC?
That's a stump question.
I mean, if you, we're just going to dive right on in.
Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, sure. So if you'd like, you can even just read off of that for it.
Oh,
for
spent
us.
nuclear fuel
Yes.
at high levels already. Well, basically, we've got to make sure that we're protecting our community, and I think that's from a number of levels. If it's from the water levels that we've seen with the Missouri River, or if it's just from nuclear fuel that's at Benester Mall and the complex or other areas, we want to make sure that our city is safe and free and clean of any type of chemicals. And I think that, of course, we'll work with our remediation department, our brownfields department, and ensure that we are able to get the resources from the federal government to be able to do any type of remediation that's certainly needed. And I think that's probably the best way I can answer that question.
Hey, that was a great question, though.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. We're making us think a lot.
Send us a little bit more.
So we're just kind of move right along. Can you share with us a little bit of what your vision is for Kansas City, especially if you were to become mayor?
Well, I'll start off with a quote from James Baldwin, and he once said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. And I think that we in our city, while we're up and coming, and there's a lot of things that are happening from the airport, with which we had our groundbreaking yesterday, to the downtown hotel, and things that are happening throughout the heart of the city, the streetcar, which is getting ready to be expanded. A lot of great things are happening. But there are some things that we in this city have to be able to face together as some challenges. That of reducing violent crimes in the city, that of being able to make sure that we are increasingly focused on our basic infrastructure. Again, like I mentioned early on about just our crumbling roads and sidewalks, potholes, and how can we actually have that sort of attention. And then the third part of it is, I think, just basic city services. I subscribe to City Hall is in the dinosaur age. We feel like, and we tout ourselves as a city that is on the cutting edge of technology with Google Fiber, and been a smart city and a lot of initiatives that are certainly taking place. But we have to do a lot better to be able to communicate with our residents. There should be a 24-hour hotline that you should be able to pull out your mobile device and be able to communicate directly with the City Hall, so that you are able to, again, if there's a pothole that's out there, you can report it, and they're coming out there within 24 hours to patch it up. And then if not, you're able to have real-time technology that determines, what's going on, and so you don't have to get a number from 311 to figure out how it works. Additionally, I also think that one of the things that really bothers me a great deal is the trash and debris that we find throughout our entire city. Unfortunately, sometimes I think people find our communities as a dumping ground, and that's regardless of where you live. If that in the north, the south, the east, and west, we do see a lot of it on the east part of our actual city. But we've got to do a lot of things to ensure that we are protecting our city, keeping it very clean, in a place that is healthy and something that we all enjoy. And so, at the core of my campaign and the things that I want to be focused on, I want to be known as the quality of life candidate, the person who really helped advance everyone's quality of life, regardless of what zip code you actually live in, and that it's a community that we can all live, work, and play in, regardless of, again, that zip code. And I think at the core of everything that I've heard from citizens throughout this entire city, that we have to improve our communities one child, one family, and one neighborhood at a time. And that's what I want to be focused on. Of course, my first 100 days in office, if elected mayor of the city, I want to be focused on making sure that we are tackling these tough problems together and facing it together as a community.
That's excellent. Thank you. It's quite a legacy that you put for yourself, by the way. But that's a great lead into our next question, actually. And so, what are the three biggest issues facing Kansas City? And kind of to go maybe expand more on what you were saying in your first 100 days, how do you plan to tackle these issues in the first 90 days?
Yeah, so, and I think, and I really appreciate the way you sort of couched it again, that they are bold, and they all deserve a sense of urgency. And I think that my tenure on the city council really does show that type of urgency and a bold vision to move a community forward. And just imagine if you enlarged my territory in terms of the entire city, of how much attention and the boldness that we could take. Let me give a quick story before I get to the heart of your question. I'll never forget going into the 10th Commission meeting when I was 25 years old. I was elected, the youngest person ever elected to the city council in city history at 25 years old. And I went in there and I said, we're going to build a new grocery store at 39th and Prospect, which I discussed a little earlier. And I remember pretty much the TIF commissioner, I say one, the TIF commissioner, it's a commission with multiple, but at least one commissioner said to me, we don't do projects over there like that. Now that broke my heart. And then he proceeded to say, well, who are you? You know, you look kind of young. And I said, well, I'm Jermaine Reed. I'm good looking. I'm the city councilman, you know. And then he said, well, you know, you're kind of young. And he says, I've got clothes older than you. And I said, well, you should go buy some new clothes. Because I'm here to talk about this project that needs to be built right in the heart of the community. And I'm going to be back next month and the month after until we get this project built, because you all are supposed to be financing these type of projects in the heart of the community. And I think that when you, to the heart of your question, when you ask, you know, how will you be able to tackle many of these tough issues in your first 100 days, it will be with that same sense of urgency, just as I had as a young legislator moving into a leadership position to be able to tackle some of these issues. And so I plan to be able to appoint board and commission members throughout this entire city, certainly a number of women, African American women for that matter as well, that reflect the diversity of this actual city and community. So that if it's from the Parks Board, or if it's from just basic TIF or incentive boards that we have, or even if it's our PIAC representatives who are responsible for our infrastructure, I want to be able to have people that reflect the diversity of this community that can help us move the needle and have the same sense of urgency, that realize that these are the things that we need to be able to accomplish. In addition to that, I also want to be able to have a 100-day plan that will help set the priorities for this actual city. We have a number of council members that also will be new to the city council as well, and I want to make sure that we all have a vision and our priorities that reflect this city as well.
All right, great. So
I can talk about that.
I know, like, see them all behind us, like, all right, we need to keep
No
moving
problem,
aside.
no problem. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So
I get passionate about this.
It's all right.
Somebody has to be passionate about what's going on in the city.
Why not? Okay, so that kind of just helps though to build on to the next kind of segment that we're going to do for questions, which is really based around our communities here in Kansas City. And so the first question that I have is a three-part question.
Sure.
And so it's really going to be talking about economic development, all that. So let's go ahead and we'll dig into that. So how do you plan to preserve communities east of Truce in a climate that supports developers and dollars? What must the city do to continue economic development? And should the city use tax incremental financing, so TIP, differently? And if so, what do you propose?
Okay, so that is a loaded three-part question.
Yes.
But I think at the core, much of what I've already been discussing touches on many of those topics. So I'll start off with the what, which is I think the first part of your questions. And I really think that we as a community have to make sure, in terms of being able to protect our actual community, that there are so many senior citizens, and there's this word that we often hear of gentrification, and people feel as if that they're going to be priced out of their actual community. And we have to do everything that we can to be able to protect our senior citizens so that they can age in place, and that we're not changing the landscape of our community just because a developer comes in and says that they have the best plan for your community. A lot of communities throughout this entire city, especially in the heart of this city, they have plans that have been in place for a number of years, and it's important that we're finding and attracting the type of developers that are actually able to do the type of development that we need to see, that really enhances the quality of life for the citizens and the actual communities in which we live. You know, I think the other part of the question was, what was that?
So what must the city do to continue economic development?
So and I think what I mentioned earlier in terms of what must we continue to do to incent economic development in the heart of our city is do what we've done on 39th and Prospect, do what we've done on 31st and Prospect with the grocery stores. But we also can't, the city also can't be the one that's funding all of this and then working with the right developers. We've got to be able to ensure that we are cutting a lot of the red tape and ensuring that folks that want to do business with the city, that we make it a lot easier for them. Unfortunately, I found out too often times in speaking with a number of business owners, especially minority business owners, that it's too difficult. If you're trying to open up a business just like where we are right now, It's difficult to get a permit for you to be able to open and get the business license that you may need, or for you to do construction or what have you. We've got to make it a lot easier so that people can do business, and that we're not losing business to other municipalities or the border war that we sometimes see, as we lost, the soccer village out at the Legends some 10 years ago. We have to make sure that our city shows that we are open for business, and we want to make it easier for people to actually do business in the city. And so that's part of my 100-day plan and strategy as well, is that we figure out ways to make sure that we're cutting through the red tape and open up and making sure that our city is open for business, and that we are, if we have to refresh everything that's happening at City Hall, I want to work with the city manager, I want to work with my city council colleagues to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to make our city business friendly and open for business for sure. And then I think in terms of how do we incent the
so with TIF.
TIFs, and we have to be intentional. There are projects oftentimes, and we hear about it, and I voted yes for many of these projects. I want to be very clear. But I know that it's the projects that we've seen with TIF, there is a but-for clause. And some places where we use TIF dollars do not necessarily have a community benefit in our use. There's not blight, or there's not something that they're giving back to the actual community. And so I should not have, as I referenced earlier, had to go in as a young legislator and be able to say, no, you're going to work on this project, you're going to do this project. We should be able to have people that are working on these projects to say, here's what needs to take place. We need to make sure that we have, this real equitable policies that are actually put in place, so that we can actually do the things that I've been able to do as a council member. One of the things I want to be able to do as mayor is be able to make sure that that's in place for future development in the city, and that we're certainly been intentional about where we're placing projects in the future, and also ensuring that many of our taxing agencies like the school districts also have a voice and seat at the table as well.
Well, thank you so much for that. We actually have another question coming from our comments section. Hey sister, it's Sister Peaceful. So hey sis, how's it going? Thanks for listening, watching. We really appreciate you. So
Sister Peaceful?
Yes.
I like these names.
Yes, I know, right? So what we're gonna do is, what are your thoughts on the closing of neighborhood schools in the predominantly black areas?
Yeah. Well, this has been bothering me for quite some time, and as I've watched with the great eye on what's happening in the Hickman Middle School District, it's a bit disheartening. I know many of the school board members and friends with many of them as well, and so a lot of those areas are African American. I will also point to the Kansas City public school system, and you think back to, I think it was Dr. Covington who made some of the tough decisions to be able to close some of the schools that were neighborhood schools, and now kids are pretty much shipped from different places. As the mayor, I don't necessarily have a direct control over the schools, but I do have a voice of collaboration, and I also have a voice to be able to be at the table to bring people together and help with our citizens in terms of how their daily lives are actually impacted. I do think that, and I know for sure, that there is a sense of stability when a child does not have to go from school to school each year, making new friends one way or the other, or interrupting their learning environment. And so it is important that we're not necessarily closing many of these neighborhood schools, but we are doing things that cultivate a real important learning environment for the kids in our actual community. And as mayor, again, without no direct control of the 15 school districts in this city, I want to be able to be a leader that is one that's collaborative and able to help with the educational institutions throughout this entire city.
All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, so we're just going to kind of breeze on through some of these next questions.
Okay, is this a lightning round?
Yeah, let's try it.
I'm starting interviewing you in a minute.
That's all right. I'm game. Create. Okay, so we're going to talk about violence, because that's a common thread that continues to come up in the mayoral race. How will you collectively work alongside city council members, city departments and community organizations to develop effective solutions to our crime issues?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all answer, and I think most of the answers that I've heard throughout this mayoral debate and campaign season are all the right answers. It really hurts my heart when we talk about the numbers of homicides that have taken place in our city last year, this year, what have you. These are people, these are mothers, these are families that no longer have their loved one that is here. And I don't think you can necessarily put all of them in one box in terms of how it may have happened. Sure, there's a number of things that we need to be able to do, and as mayor, I want to be able to help push forward and expand on a lot of our social providers that have already been on the front lines. In my professional career, I work with the Out Group Against Crime to really help with a number of families that are facing some of the issues that we found. And also I realized through that work is that nearly 80% a lot of times of the people who've come into the organization, unfortunately, don't even have a high school diploma. And so it's important that we're doing everything that we can to be able to help folks if it's been able to have jobs, if we're collaborating with a lot of the social service agencies. The other thing of this is our mental health. Mental health is a big issue. And so how do we work with our health safety net providers to ensure that people can work through any sort of trauma, domestic violence, or anything that they may be experiencing. Additionally, I think it's important that we have community policing. We as a community need to be able to have officers not only that live in the community, but they can police their way out of this issue. We've got to do a number of things to be able to address this problem, and as mayor, I want to be able to work on the front lines to be able to address this for every single citizen in this entire city.
Great, thank you so much. So next question is, how will you build the trust needed to support communities impacted by crime? So we know it's really necessary.
What was that last part you said?
So it's just necessary, like
necessary.
how, yeah.
I think it's pretty much what I was basically conveying is that we do have to have trust in our community. I was speaking with the Fraternal Order of Police earlier today, and I was sharing with them some of my experiences as a youngster growing up in this community, and how I had a number of positive interactions with police officers growing up, but there's so many people who I run into, some of my siblings, who don't necessarily have those positive influence, sort of positive interactions with the actual police officers or police department for that matter. And so I think that we have, and I think at the core of my last answer about community policing is how can we bridge that gap. One of the things that I am grateful for in this community is that we have not seen what has happened in Ferguson, Missouri. We have not seen what has happened in Florida, like with the Trayvon Martin or anything along those lines. But we have to continue to build real trust with our police in our communities. And as a police board of commissioner member, as the mayor of the city, I will become one of those 5 members. My pastor actually is a member of the police board of commissioners, and my mentor was a former president of the police board of commissioners. And so I know that there's a number of great roadmaps that we have in front of us, but we have to be able to build that relationship so that we can move our communities forward.
All right. So we're just going to kind of keep it moving along. Thank you for that response.
Sure.
And, we have other really higher things too in Kansas City that we're really dealing with in terms of jobs, education, and housing, right, is a huge one. So the first question kind of includes, it talks about housing and education. And so the data that shows that stable employment and housing are important to a child's well-being, like being able to have quality education.
Yeah.
So what are the direct actions you will take to deal with skyrocketing housing prices and issues around Kansas City?
Well, let's talk about it from this angle, is that we are in a housing crisis in this actual community, but also in this country. And I've seen through my work with the National League of Cities is that communities throughout this entire country, unfortunately, are facing this housing crisis. If you go back to history, you look at the 1970s, when you had people that were maybe homeless and they were forced out of homes one way or the other. There's a number of things that we have to do to be able to address this issue. At the core of what I'm going to be focused on as the next mayor of the city is ensuring that we have 5,000 houses by the year 2023. We also have to ensure that much of the work that has been done by some of my colleagues on the council, that we're implementing those and also expanding that by getting some additional resources from the federal government. So that's the housing trust that potentially could help with nearly $75 million, and that's just the dip. Because if you look at some of the rehabs with maybe $7,000 that is going to go into some of the rehab, that's not a lot of money. And then you also have some subpar housing that some people are living in. I grew up in situations very similar to this, where we had mold or we had roaches and we had maybe a leaking ceiling or we had basement backups. And families should not have to endure that. You know, my family, as I mentioned earlier, growing up as a kid, we were homeless. We were evicted from our home. And then that, of course, leaves a lot of illegal dumping or debris on the side of the road. And people are being priced out of their actual homes. And so there's a real crisis in this community. And you look at the average income of nearly almost $48,000 per year for a household. People have to be able to have rents that they can actually afford. They have to have a steady job. They can't be spending nearly 30 to 40% of their actual income on just the basics of living at a particular place, and trying to have some reliable transportation and a number of things. And so we've got to be able to address this so that people can have the same basic quality of life for regardless of where they live. And I want to be able to address that with my peers, and also be able to work with our federal partners to be able to get dollars from HUD, to be able to get dollars from the National Trust Fund, so that we can be able to do this in our community.
All right, so we have another question out there. Thank you all for still listening in.
Another question?
Yes. All right, so this is from, hey sister, hey Amber, what's going on? She would like to know, what would you do different regarding the funding issues with 18th and Vine handling?
Well, yeah. Amber must not know all
the
this.
Jazz Museum board transition.
Oh, what would I do differently? Is it just focused on the American Jazz Museum?
Yeah,
I talk all day about
regarding the funding issues with 18th and Vine and the handling of the Jazz Museum and board transition. So it's a little.
I try not to talk all day, and I try to talk as succinctly as possible. Amber, thank you for your question. A couple of things.
Yeah.
One is that 18th and Vine is the gift to Kansas City. When you think of Kansas City, you often think of jazz, you often think of barbecue, and you often think of baseball. All of those pretty much were birthed right there, crafted. They honed all their skills. Charlie Parker, Satchel Paige, Jackie Robinson, Ella Fitzgerald, all of them were right there. And this is an important, and also let me go a bit further as well, because back in the early 1900s, this was the only place for African Americans to even go. That was the central cultural nexus in this entire community. And so it's important to me, and we stand on the shoulders of giants. And back in the 1990s, when then Mayor Emanuel Cleaver worked extremely hard to be able to get the American Jazz Museum. He got a lot of trouble at one point with the saxophone and a number of other things, but he did everything he could to be able to bring it back to life. And over my tenure on the council, I worked hard to be able to secure, in my second term, $27 million for redevelopment in the area. And so when I get questions like this, sometimes I feel like they're misguided a little in terms of how media attempts to portray what has actually happened. There have been some mistakes, and I think much of that for the American Jazz Museum stems from the Jazz Festival that was hosted at one point. But I can tell you they're on a solid footing. The council just passed nearly $1 million that helps with a new director, and then also to ensure that the museum continues to run. By no means should we be shutting the museum down in any capacity. We have to continue to preserve and enhance what the museum actually stands for. I think a number of things, challenges are ahead of us to ensure that the museums, what are they called, artifacts, and also many of their the interactive exhibits inside the museum have to also be upgraded, and so we have a number of things we need to be focused on, but it's something that I think is a real jewel in the city. And what I would do different is try to just make sure that we're hiring the right people that are focused on ensuring that we are protecting this rich legacy, and that we're enhancing the culture of the African American community and also the culture of the city.
Great, thank you so much. So Amber's question is actually going to be the last one that we have.
Oh, we were just getting warmed up.
I know. Well, we took so much time.
I'm gonna let the rest of these folks come in and tell y'all what I was gonna say, because I was just getting warmed up.
We can follow up or something later. But hey, we really appreciate you coming out and taking the time to do this.
Can I get one last word?
I think that
I was just gonna say, post supposed to be on April 2nd. I'm Jermaine Reed. That's all I was gonna say.
All right, you heard it. Okay.
Come on, that's easy.
Have a good evening. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. You gotta give me a final statement. Say both one.
No, I think